All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of SaberSim's DFS office hours. Today is Saturday, April 13th of 2024. We have a ton of DFS action going on today. We have an 11-game MLB main slate, 7-game NBA main slate, 13-fight MMA card, 7-game NHL slate, 4-game UFL slate, Xfinity today, Cup race tomorrow, and then we have Masters coverage all weekend. So if you're not signed up with SaberSim, there is no better day than today to sign up for your 5-day, no strings attached free trial and check us out. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew. I'm one of the coaches over here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS related questions. You get your questions in one of 3 ways here. First off, send us an email, support@sabersim.com. Second, post it live in the YouTube chat. Third way, post it in the office hours channel in our Discord server. If you're not in our Discord and want to get access to that channel, there is a link in the description of this video. You also get access to our similar channels, individual sport channels, and you get access to the rest of the SaberSim team. So can't say enough good things about the Discord. But with that said, we do this show Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern. We do the show here on Saturdays at 11 a.m. Eastern. So thanks for tuning in early and looking forward to a good show today. So with that said, looks like we have a few questions here in the Discord to get us kicked off. I'm going to get the app pulled up. I just kicked off some lineups. Figured we could talk a little bit about MMA today with the UFC 300 card. Going to be an awesome card here. And it looks like we have 2 questions from Steven. All right. First question. How does slate size, 2-game, 4-game, 8-game, etc., factor into your thought process on whether you want to play a slate? What are the merits of each of these 2 options in the contest sim settings? Okay, so first question here, let's talk about slate size. So really slate size I don't really care about slate size, as far as like, hey, am I going to avoid a 2-game slate, or like, do I need at least 4 games on the slate to play? I don't think that's, something I ever think about. Something I will think about is how much money I'm going to wager based on the slate size. I think that's a good question here, right? So like playing a, NFL regular season Sunday main slate is a little bit different than playing a NFL playoff 4-game playoff main slate or something like over the weekend, right? Or like a 2-3 gamer. So I think as far as, the number of games on the slate, it's not going to matter too much on like whether I play or not. I just might attack it with a different amount of my bankroll. So like, our DFS profit plan says to play like 2.5 to 5% of your bankroll on any given slate. I might be more willing to play like closer to 5% on like a regular season NFL main slate on like a Sunday. But in the playoffs, hey, maybe I'll lean more toward that like 2.5% side, and maybe I'll, attack it with like a little less money overall. So that's the way I like to think about it. And then the second part here is what are the merits of these 2 options? And we're looking at the field lineups. We're looking at SaberSim ownership versus build 1. So this is a good question. So if I go over to my contest sim settings and I go to set this up right now, I was doing some testing earlier. Let's just open up a fresh one here. So if I go to field lineups, I'm going to see SaberSim ownership is the default, right? So what is that? Well, first off, that is the ownership build that creates our ownership projections, right? So if I go to my contest tab, I go down to field lineups, I can see what the SaberSim set of field lineups are. So this is what creates our ownership projections. If we click on this, it's going to pull up our build here. And we can see what we have 10,000 field lineups for MMA. And then if I open up the players here and I look at the exposures from this build, well, these exposures are going to match the ownership projections in the app. So if I want to, check this, right? Alex Pereira, 32%, Bo Nickel, 32%, like approximately here. If I go over to my build and I sort by ownership, hey, Pereira, 32%, Bo Nickel, 31.7, which is like what he was at on the other screen. So remember that the ownership projections are exposures from an ownership build. So that is what the SaberSim ownership option is. Now, what build 2 is you can run a contest sim against your own set of lineups. So what would happen is we would take, however many lineups are in your pool, and then we would play out that contest against itself. So we don't recommend doing that. We like to have this static set of field lineups because We think that the field is going to play players at a particular rate. Your build by default is not going to have those restrictions or impacts. The exposures you might get might be very different from what is in the ownership build. So we like to take your lineups, put them in a contest with the field lineups, play that out, as opposed to play out a contest over and over again against the lineups that you built. So I would stick with the SaberSim ownership option. All right, question here from Sammy. Sammy said, what is the criteria of bumping projections versus exposures and vice versa? Good question. I think that, using minimax exposures is a good way to get exactly what you want. Like, hey, I know I want X, whether that's, I know I don't want a player more than X exposure, or I know I want to play this player at least this rate. I think that's a good option for a good reason to use exposures. Now, projection adjustments are two reasons here. One, maybe I think that there is something that the projections are not taking into account by default, and I want to give the builder a better input here. Option number two is, maybe I think this player is going to do good, but I'm not super opinionated about how many lineups they get into, right? So if you're like, hey, I kind of like this, fighter. I don't really know how many lineups I want them in, so maybe I'm just going to give them a 2-point boost or something and let SaberSim figure out how many lineups to put them in from there. I think that's a fine approach. Another option here, something I would probably do if you're going to go that route, is to just run a default build and see how much of them you're getting automatically. And then, compare that to after you make your change and then run your new build. How many lineups with them are you getting now? And you can see the impact of that adjustment. And then number two is, maybe that, you think there's something that the builder isn't accounting for. So you want to adjust some projections. This is an interesting one, because sometimes you're like, okay, Bo Nickel's at 94 points. Maybe I think he's going to get to 97 for X, Y, and Z factors. And then you run it, and then either his exposure doesn't change, or if you were getting none of him, you're still getting none of him. It could feel bad to find something that you think is value, and then when you give the builder that new input, it really doesn't end up affecting their exposure. But the way I like to look at it is hey, I want to give the builder the most accurate inputs I possibly can, and then let it evaluate what the best decisions are about the lineups from there. So this happens to me all the time in NBA. It's okay, I think this guy's gonna play maybe 3 more minutes. That gives him a pretty good fantasy point boost, and then he still ends up I don't know, even barely matching his ownership. So I know that even if he does good, I'm not gonna benefit from it much, and it feels a little bit bad. But I know that the builder is seeing that input. It's not ignoring it. It's just determining that even at that projection, you still shouldn't be playing that much of that player for, salary, for however they fit into lineups, for correlation, for whatever reason. So that's not my area of expertise. The lineup construction part, I leave that to SaberSim. I let it do what it does best and just try to make those adjustments. So those are the different ways to come at exposure adjustments versus projection, etc. here. All right. Question from Mufasa. Question says, does SaberSim have the option of weighted average projections? I don't see that option, and it was there last year specifically for MLB. Yeah, definitely. I'm pretty positive. So if I go to MLB for today, so let's say that I save an ownership set, right? You need to have at least more than one set. So let's say I make some adjustments. I click my gear icon. I click save. I'm going to call this source 1. So then now I have SaberSim. Now I have source 1. If I click the gear icon, and I can go to add weighted average, and then I can name it whatever I want, number 3, fine. And then I could say, okay, I want to weight, SaberSim 75%, and I want to weight my projections 25%. And then I save this, and then I get a new column, which is this number 3. And then these are my weighted average projections here. So that is how you do it. The gear icon, add weighted average down on the bottom. But All right. Taking a quick peek here. Looks like we are all caught up on questions here in both the Discord and the YouTube chat. Appreciate you guys tuning in on a Saturday morning here. Jack Doherty said, can you break down a geomean structure for someone playing 150 max on UFC? Yeah, man, no problem. So first thing I would do is just identify how many entries are in your contest, right? So it's like, say you're playing the mini max today, right? So we go to like UFC, we go to contests, and let's go and see what the mini max is. Okay, mega mini max, which is 100, or let's say you're playing the flagship, right? 150 max, 38,000 entries. So then what I would do is identify a number that you want to start with, right? Maybe you want to do like a couple different geomeans. Okay, so you're playing the mini max. So that's fine. So let's say you want to start with a couple different numbers. Like, you know what? I want to see what a geomean for like 20 dupes would be, 10 dupes, 5 dupes. So what I would do here is you start with the number of dupes you want. So 20 divided by you go to the power of 1 divided by the number of players in a lineup, which is 6 here. Click equal. So that number is 25.1, right? You just move the decimal place over to two decimals. And then, you know, if you wanted to do 10 dupes, you would replace the 20 with 10. You replace the 10 with 5. So I'm going to do this 25.1, right? So I have this build where I already built lineups. So then what I would do here is make sure I have a custom metric set up that looks like this, my own product geomean value. I just named it geomean. That way I know what it is. And then once I have that custom metric, I can come into my build that I ran, go to the filters, and then say show lineups. And then what this shows me is that, hey, we trashed 1,165 lineups. I built 2,500. According to this product ownership calculation, are expected to be duplicated less than 20 times in this contest. So you get, you know, adjust the number if you want to do less dupes, more dupes, whatever you want to allow. Ultimately, I think that, you know, product ownership and geomean are a really good tool. I don't think they're like an end all be all. Like, you might do this and then there still might be lineups that are duped more than 20 times. Like, that does happen. So be aware of, like, you know, salary, be aware of lineup construction, you know, what fighters fit well together, maybe even like run a cash build to see what the most common pay up and pay down options are. Like, where are people paying up? Where are people paying down? When, you know, using a traditional optimizer. So that's how you do it. We do also have a tutorial here. If you go to our help docs and you go down to frequently asked questions, type in geometric, and we have this video, how do ownership product and ownership geometric mean work? And I'll drop that here in the chat in case anybody needs to use that as a refresher as the day goes on here. So check that out. Happy to walk through that example for you. But with that said, I'm going to get out of here, everybody. I will see you guys all on Monday, 4 p.m. Eastern. So good luck this weekend. If you're not signed up, check us out. 5-day, no strings attached free trial in the description. So until then, good luck. Thanks. Bye.